The homeless boy hid inside an empty control tower. Someone was already watching him from the dark. Tell us in the comments which city you are listening from. Click the like button and let's begin the story. Liam was 11 years old when he learned that survival sometimes means trusting your fear more than the adults who claim they want to help you. He had been living at the Riverside Youth Shelter for 2 years, ever since the night his mother disappeared, and the police found him sleeping in the back of her car at a highway rest stop. No relatives came forward. No one asked questions. The state took him, processed him, and delivered him to Riverside with a file folder and a plastic bag containing 3 T-shirts and a stuffed bear he no longer looked at. The shelter was a 3-story brick building on the edge of the city, surrounded by chain-link fencing and security cameras that never actually worked. 42 children lived there, crammed into rooms designed for half that number. The air always smelled like disinfectant and something rotten underneath, something no amount of cleaning could remove. Director Harris ran the place like a warden. He was a heavy man in his 50s with thinning hair and eyes that calculated value the way a pawnbroker examines jewelry. He smiled during state inspections and spoke about rehabilitation and second chances. But the children knew better. They knew the good donations never reached them. They knew the weekly menus were lies. They knew that some children left in the middle of the night and were never mentioned again. Liam had tried to stay invisible. He kept his head down during meals, never complained about the cold showers or the broken heater in winter, and learned to sleep through the sounds of older kids fighting in the hallways. Invisibility was survival. But invisibility only worked if you were lucky. 3 weeks ago, Liam's luck ended. It started with Maya, an 8-year-old girl with braided hair who used to hum while doing chores. One morning she was gone. Director Harris announced she had been placed with a wonderful family in another state. The children clapped politely because that's what they were supposed to do. 2 weeks later, it was Marcus, a 13-year-old who had taught Liam how to pick the lock on the storage room where they kept the expired snacks. Marcus left in the middle of the night. No goodbye. No forwarding address. Then it was Elena, a quiet girl who drew pictures of houses with gardens and families holding hands. 3 children. 3 sudden departures. 3 fabricated stories. Liam started paying attention. He noticed the late-night visitors, well-dressed men and women who arrived after the younger children were asleep. He noticed Director Harris's office light staying on past midnight. He noticed the locked filing cabinets and the hushed phone conversations. And he noticed the way Director Harris started looking at him. It was the same look he had given Maya, Marcus, and Elena in the days before they disappeared. Last night, Liam had been in the bathroom when he overheard Director Harris talking on his cell phone in the hallway. The boy fits the profile perfectly. 11 years old, no family connections, no one asking questions. The client is very interested. I can have him ready by Friday. Liam's hands had gone numb. Friday was tomorrow. He spent the rest of the night lying awake in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, listening to the breathing of the other children around him. He knew what he had to do. He had known for weeks, but hearing his own life being negotiated over the phone made it real. He had to run. At 3 a.m, when the overnight supervisor was asleep in the break room, Liam gathered everything that mattered. It fit into a small backpack, 1 change of clothes, a water bottle he had been refilling for days, a pocket knife he had found in the alley behind the shelter, the $23 he had saved from odd jobs, and the photograph of his mother that he kept folded in his pocket. The window in the second-floor bathroom had a broken latch. Everyone knew about it, but no one had ever been desperate enough to use it. Until now. Liam pushed the window open as quietly as possible and looked down. The drop was 12 feet onto a patch of gravel. He threw his backpack first, then climbed onto the windowsill, heart hammering so loudly he was certain someone would hear. He jumped. The impact knocked the wind out of him, but nothing broke. He grabbed his backpack and ran, not looking back at the building that had been his prison disguised as shelter. He ran through empty streets, past closed businesses and flickering streetlights, past the last bus stop where he had once imagined escaping, past the edge of the city where buildings gave way to industrial parks and vacant lots. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs refused to move faster. And when he finally stopped, gasping for air, he realized he had no idea where he was. The sky was beginning to lighten. Dawn was coming, and with it the certainty that Director Harris would discover his absence. They would search. They would call the police. They would spin a story about a troubled child who ran away, and no one would question it. Liam looked around, trying to orient himself. He was standing at the edge of what appeared to be an abandoned industrial area. Massive empty warehouses stretched in every direction, their windows shattered, their walls covered in graffiti. Rusted fences sagged under the weight of climbing vines. And in the distance, rising above the ruins like a concrete monument, stood a control tower. It was tall and angular, built from poured concrete that had weathered to gray. The windows at the top were dark and empty. The structure looked like it had been forgotten decades ago, left behind when whatever operation it once served shut down. Liam walked toward it, exhaustion overriding caution. As he got closer, he could see that the tower stood in the middle of what had once been a small airport. The runways were cracked and overgrown with weeds. Rusted equipment sat abandoned beside collapsed hangars. Everything was silent except for the wind moving through the broken structures. The base of the control tower was surrounded by a chain-link fence, but the gate had long since been torn away. Liam walked through and approached the entrance. The metal door was partially open, hanging crooked on broken hinges. He pushed it wider and stepped inside. The interior was dark and smelled of damp concrete and rust. A staircase spiraled upward, its metal steps covered in dust and debris. Some of the railings had broken away, leaving gaps that opened onto emptiness below. Liam hesitated, listening. Nothing. He began to climb. Each step echoed in the vertical shaft. His breathing sounded too loud. Halfway up, he paused and looked down. The entrance was already lost in shadows below. He kept climbing. At the top, another door blocked the way. This one was heavier industrial steel, but it wasn't locked. Liam pushed with his shoulder, and it scraped open just enough for him to slip through. The control room was larger than he expected. Curved windows wrapped around three sides, offering a panoramic view of the abandoned airport and the industrial wasteland beyond. The glass was cracked and filthy, but enough light filtered through to reveal the space. The room was filled with old equipment, control panels covered in dust, microphones dangling from broken mounts, chairs tipped over, papers scattered across the floor, yellowed and brittle. It looked like everyone had simply walked away one day and never returned. Liam dropped his backpack and leaned against the wall, letting himself breathe for the first time in hours. He was safe. For now. He walked slowly around the room, examining everything. The control panels were dead, their screens shattered or missing entirely. The radio equipment was useless, picked apart by scavengers long ago. But the space itself was intact. The roof didn't leak. The walls were solid. It could work. He could hide here for days, maybe weeks, while he figured out what to do next. He found a corner near one of the windows where he could sit and watch the approaches to the tower. If anyone came, he would see them from a distance. He spread out his jacket as a makeshift cushion and sat down, finally allowing exhaustion to settle over him. That's when he heard it. A sound. Soft. Deliberate. Somewhere behind him in the darkness. Liam froze, every muscle tensing. He had thought the control room was a single open space, but now, looking more carefully, he could see a doorway on the far wall, partially hidden behind a collapsed section of ceiling panels. The sound came again. A scrape. Like something being dragged slowly across concrete. Liam's heart began to pound. He was not alone. Someone was here. Someone had been here all along, watching him from the shadows, waiting to see what he would do. Liam stood slowly, backing toward the staircase door, his eyes locked on the dark doorway across the room. A figure stepped into the dim light. It was a man, tall, thin, older, maybe 50 or 60, with gray hair that hung past his shoulders and a beard that covered most of his face. His clothes were worn and patched, layered against the cold. His eyes were dark and sunken, but sharp, watching Liam with an intensity that made the boy's skin crawl. Neither of them moved. The man spoke first, his voice rough from disuse. "You shouldn't be here." Liam's hand tightened on the strap of his backpack. "I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone was here. I'll leave." Too late for that. The man stepped closer, and Liam saw that he was holding something. A metal rod, probably salvaged from the equipment. Not a weapon exactly, but it could be. "How did you find this place?" the man asked. "I was just running. I didn't mean to." Running from what? Liam hesitated. The truth felt dangerous, but lying felt worse. "People who want to hurt me." The man studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he lowered the rod. "Sit down," he said. "You look like you're about to collapse." Liam didn't move. "I'm not going to hurt you," the man said, his voice softer now. "If I wanted to, I already would have." It was a terrible logic, but it was also true. Liam sat down slowly, keeping his distance. The man walked to one of the control panels and sat on an overturned crate, leaning back against the wall. For a while, neither of them spoke. Finally, the man broke the silence. "My name is Samuel," he said. "I used to work here. A long time ago." "You're a homeless person?" Liam asked, then immediately regretted how it sounded. Samuel smiled faintly. "I'm a person who lives here. There's a difference." "How long?" 23 years. Liam stared at him. "You've been living in this tower for 23 years. Not just living. Waiting." "Waiting for what?" Samuel looked out the window at the empty runways. "For something I lost." He didn't elaborate, and Liam didn't push. They sat in silence as the morning light grew stronger, filling the control room with pale gray illumination. Outside, the world was waking up, but inside the tower, time felt suspended. Samuel stood and walked to the hidden doorway. "Come," he said. Liam hesitated, then followed. The doorway led to a smaller back room that had once been a storage area. Samuel had transformed it into a living space. There was a cot with neatly folded blankets, shelves made from salvaged wood holding canned food and water bottles, and a small camping stove. Everything was organized with meticulous care. "You're hungry," Samuel said. It wasn't a question. Liam nodded. Samuel opened a can of soup and heated it on the stove. He poured it into 2 chip mugs and handed one to Liam. The soup was thin and lukewarm, but it was the first warm food Liam had eaten in days. "Thank you," Liam said quietly. Samuel nodded. They ate in silence. When they finished, Samuel washed the mugs in a basin of collected rainwater and set them on the shelf. "You can stay," he said, "for a few days, until you figure out what you're doing." "Why would you help me?" Samuel looked at him with those sharp, sad eyes. "Because a long time ago, someone helped me when I had nowhere else to go. And because I know what it's like to run from something that won't stop chasing you." Liam felt something loosen in his chest. Relief, maybe, or something closer to hope. "What are you running from?" he asked. Samuel turned back to the window, staring out at the abandoned runways. "The same thing you are," he said quietly. "The past." Over the following days, Liam learned to navigate life inside the tower. Samuel had systems for everything. Water collection from the roof. Food storage in sealed containers to keep out rats. A schedule for when to move around the tower and when to stay silent, in case anyone wandered too close. "People forget places like this exist," Samuel explained. "As long as we don't draw attention, they'll keep forgetting." Liam also learned about Samuel's past, though the man shared it slowly, piece by piece, like revealing a map of scars. Samuel had been a civilian air traffic controller at this small regional airport in the early 1980s. It wasn't a busy facility, mostly private planes and cargo flights, but Samuel took his job seriously. He loved the precision of it, the responsibility, the knowledge that lives depended on clear communication and careful judgment. Then came the accident. It was a clear afternoon in October, when a small private plane requested clearance to land. Samuel guided the pilot through the approach, reading out wind conditions and runway assignments, everything by the book. But something went wrong. The plane came in too fast and too steep. Samuel saw it through the tower windows and began shouting corrections into the radio, but the pilot didn't respond. The plane hit the runway hard, bounced, veered sideways, and cartwheeled into the grass, erupting in flames. 3 people died: the pilot, his wife, and their 7-year-old daughter. The investigation cleared Samuel of any wrongdoing. Mechanical failure, they concluded. Nothing he could have prevented. But Samuel never forgave himself. "I hear them sometimes," he told Liam one night as they sat in the dark control room, looking out at the runways. The voices on the radio. The pilot's last words. The screaming after the crash. "It wasn't your fault," Liam said. "I know that," Samuel replied. "But knowing something doesn't make it true in here." He tapped his chest, where his heart was. Liam understood. He carried his own ghosts. As the days passed, Samuel began teaching Liam things. How to read the old aviation maps that still hung on the walls, showing flight paths and navigational landmarks. How to interpret weather patterns by watching the sky. How to calculate distances and trajectories using the tools controllers had relied on before computers. "Why are you teaching me this?" Liam asked one afternoon. "Because precision matters," Samuel said. "Because when you understand how things work, the world feels less chaotic. And because you're smart enough to learn." No one had ever called Liam smart before. He spent hours studying the maps, tracing routes with his finger, memorizing the names of places he had never been. Samuel quizzed him, and when Liam got answers right, the old man nodded with something that looked almost like pride. But the fragile peace couldn't last. On the 8th day, Liam was sitting by the window when he saw vehicles approaching in the distance. 2 white vans, moving slowly along the overgrown access road that led to the airport. His blood went cold. "Samuel," he called quietly. The older man appeared immediately, reading the urgency in Liam's voice. He looked out the window, and his jaw tightened. "Who are they?" "The shelter," Liam said. "They're looking for me." Samuel watched the vans carefully. They stopped near the entrance to the airport grounds, and several men got out. They wore civilian clothes, but they moved with purpose, spreading out to search the area. "They don't know you're here specifically," Samuel said. "They're searching everywhere. If we stay quiet, they'll move on." But one of the men was walking directly toward the control tower. Samuel pulled Liam away from the window. "Back room. Now, don't make a sound." Liam obeyed, retreating into the storage space and crouching behind the shelves. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Samuel stayed in the main control room, positioning himself where he could watch the approaches. Minutes passed. Then they heard it. Footsteps on the metal stairs. Someone was climbing the tower. Samuel moved quickly, grabbing the metal rod he had been holding the day Liam arrived. He positioned himself beside the door, waiting. The footsteps reached the top. The door scraped open. A man stepped inside, heavy-set and breathing hard from the climb. He looked around the control room, seeing only dust and abandoned equipment. "Nobody here," he called down the stairwell. Then he spotted Samuel. The 2 men stared at each other. "Didn't know anyone was squatting up here," the man said carefully. "I'm not squatting," Samuel replied. "I live here." "Right. Well, we're looking for a kid. 11 years old, dark hair, probably scared. You seen anyone like that?" "No." The man studied Samuel for a moment, then glanced around the room again. "You sure?" "I've been alone here for 23 years, Samuel said evenly. "I would have noticed a child." The man seemed to accept this. He nodded and turned toward the stairs. But then he paused. "You know, there's a reward," he said. $500 for information leading to the boy's location. If you happen to see him, there's a number you can call." He pulled a business card from his pocket and set it on one of the control panels. Then he left. Samuel waited until the footsteps faded completely before moving to the window. He watched the men regroup below, saw them talk briefly, then climb back into the vans and drive away. Only when they were completely gone did he return to the storage room. "They're gone," he said. Liam came out slowly, shaking. "They had a reward," he whispered. "You could have turned me in." I could have, Samuel agreed. But I didn't. Why not? Samuel looked at him with those tired, ancient eyes. Because $500 isn't worth betraying the first person who's trusted me in 23 years. Liam felt tears sting his eyes, but he blinked them away. That night, they talked more than they ever had before. Liam told Samuel everything. The shelter. Director Harris. The children who disappeared. The phone call he had overheard. Samuel listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each detail. When Liam finished, Samuel was quiet for a long time. You know they're trafficking children, he finally said. I don't know what that means exactly, Liam admitted. It means they're selling children to people who will exploit them. Labor. Abuse. Worse things. It means Director Harris is part of something much bigger and much more evil than a corrupt shelter. Liam felt sick. What do I do? You can't go back, Samuel said. But you can't run forever either. Eventually they'll find you, or you'll get picked up by police, and the system will return you to Harris. So what do I do? Liam asked again, his voice breaking. Samuel stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkness. We stop running, he said quietly. We stop hiding, and we fight back. How? Samuel turned to face him. I spent 23 years hiding from the world, because I was too broken to face it. But you're not broken, Liam. You're scared, but you're not broken. And neither am I anymore. He walked over and knelt down so he was eye level with the boy. I have contacts, he said. People I used to work with in aviation. Some of them went into federal law enforcement. I haven't spoken to them in decades, but if what you're telling me is true, they'll listen. What if they don't believe me? They'll believe me, Samuel said. Because I'll tell them I've been watching that shelter from this tower. I'll tell them I've seen things. I'll tell them whatever I need to tell them to get them to investigate. You'd lie for me? I'd tell the truth for you, Samuel corrected. The truth that a child is in danger and needs protection. The specifics don't matter as much as the outcome. Liam looked at him, this strange, solitary man who had lived in isolation for more than 2 decades, and realized that Samuel was offering something Liam had never expected to receive. Not just protection, a chance to actually fight back. When do we start? Liam asked. Samuel smiled faintly. Tomorrow. The next morning, Samuel did something he hadn't done in 23 years. He left the tower. Liam watched from the control room windows as Samuel walked across the abandoned tarmac, his figure growing smaller until he disappeared into the industrial wasteland beyond. For 6 hours, Liam was alone. He tried to stay calm, tried to focus on the maps and the lessons Samuel had been teaching him, but fear kept creeping in. What if Samuel didn't come back? What if he had changed his mind? What if the outside world swallowed him whole? But as the sun began to set, Liam saw a figure approaching in the distance. Samuel. He was moving slower than before, tired from a day of walking, but he was carrying something. A plastic bag. Liam ran down the stairs to meet him at the entrance. I thought you weren't coming back, Liam said, breathless. Samuel looked at him, surprised. I told you I would come back. I know, but... Then trust it, Samuel said gently. When someone gives you their word, trust it until they prove otherwise. He handed Liam the bag. Inside were sandwiches, fresh fruit, and 2 bottles of water. I also made some calls, Samuel said as they climbed back up the tower. From a payphone. Old-fashioned, but effective. What did you say? I called someone I used to work with. His name is Agent Garrett. He's with a federal task force that investigates organized crime, including human trafficking. Liam's eyes widened. What did he say? He said they've been watching Riverside for months. They suspected Harris was involved in something, but they didn't have enough evidence to move. Your testimony could change that. But I'm just a kid. Why would they believe me? Samuel sat down heavily, exhausted from the day. Because you're not alone anymore, he said. I told Garrett that I'm willing to testify too. That I've been observing suspicious activity from this tower. That I have documentation. But you don't have documentation. I will by the time they ask, Samuel said. I spent today walking through this airport, photographing everything. I documented vehicles that matched the description of the ones that came looking for you. I recorded times and dates. I created a surveillance log. You made it all up? I created a narrative that supports the truth, Samuel corrected. The truth is that children are being trafficked. The details of how we discovered it matter less than stopping it. Liam sat down beside him. When do they want to meet? 3 days. Garrett is coming here personally. He wants to hear both our stories, and then he'll decide whether to launch a full investigation. 3 days felt like an eternity, but they also felt like hope. Over those 3 days, Samuel and Liam prepared. Samuel taught Liam exactly what to say, how to present his story clearly and factually, how to anticipate questions and answer them without hesitation. Don't embellish, Samuel instructed. Don't try to make it sound worse than it is. Just tell the truth, and the truth will be damning enough. Liam practiced his testimony over and over, reciting the events in chronological order until they felt like a script he could deliver without breaking down. Meanwhile, Samuel prepared his own documentation. He created detailed logs of the vehicles that had searched the airport. He drafted written statements describing his observations. He organized everything into a folder that looked official and thorough. On the morning of the 3rd day, they waited. Agent Garrett arrived at noon in an unmarked sedan. He was a man in his early 50s, fit and professional, wearing a suit despite the ruined terrain. He climbed the tower stairs without hesitation and knocked on the control room door. Samuel opened it. For a moment, the two men just looked at each other. "Samuel," Garrett said quietly. "It's been a long time." "Too long," Samuel replied. They shook hands, and Garrett stepped inside. His eyes swept the control room, taking in the equipment, the maps, the evidence of decades spent in isolation. Then he saw Liam. "You must be Liam," he said, his voice gentler. "I'm Agent Garrett. I'm here to help." Liam nodded, not trusting himself to speak. They sat down, and for the next 2 hours, Liam told his story. He described life at Riverside, the conditions, the fear, the children who disappeared, the phone call he had overheard. Garrett listened without interrupting, taking notes in a leather journal. When Liam finished, Garrett turned to Samuel. "And you corroborate this?" Samuel handed him the folder. "I've been documenting suspicious activity for weeks. Unmarked vehicles, nighttime transfers, patterns consistent with organized crime." Garrett reviewed the materials carefully. Finally, he closed the folder and looked at both of them. "What you're describing aligns with an ongoing federal investigation," he said. "We've been tracking a trafficking network operating across 3 states. Riverside has been on our radar, but we haven't had enough evidence to obtain warrants." "Do you now?" Samuel asked. "With Liam's testimony and your documentation, yes. I can get a warrant approved by tomorrow morning." Liam felt dizzy with relief. "What happens to me?" he asked quietly. Garrett leaned forward. "You'll be placed in protective custody during the investigation. Not at Riverside and not in the standard system. We have safe houses specifically for witnesses. You'll be protected and you'll be safe." "And after the investigation?" "That depends," Garrett said. "If you want, we can work on finding you a permanent placement. A real family, not the system." Liam looked at Samuel, who was staring out the window. "Can I stay with Samuel?" Liam asked. Garrett glanced at Samuel, surprised. "Is that something you'd be willing to consider?" he asked the older man. Samuel turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "I haven't been responsible for another person in 23 years, he said quietly. "I don't know if I'm capable." "You've kept me alive for almost 2 weeks, Liam said. "You taught me things. You protected me. That's being responsible." Samuel's eyes softened. "It's not the same as being a parent." "I don't need a parent," Liam said. "I need someone who won't sell me." The room fell silent. Finally, Garrett spoke. The court would require a full evaluation, background checks, home inspections. It would take months. "Then start the process," Samuel said quietly. "I'll do whatever is required." Liam felt something break open inside his chest, something warm and painful and hopeful all at once. The operation happened fast. Within 48 hours, federal agents raided Riverside Youth Shelter. They arrested Director Harris and 3 staff members. They seized computers, financial records, and communications that revealed a network spanning 12 facilities across 3 states. 47 children were removed from Riverside and placed in emergency protective care. Liam watched the news coverage from the safe house where he was staying, a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood 2 hours from the city. A federal marshal sat in the living room. A social worker checked on him twice a day. But all Liam could think about was Samuel, alone again in the tower. On the 5th day, Agent Garrett came to visit. "The investigation is expanding," he said. "We've identified at least 60 additional victims, and we're pursuing charges against 14 individuals in 4 states." "Is it over?" Liam asked. "The arrests are just the beginning," Garrett replied. "The trials will take years. But the network is broken. They can't hurt any more children." "What about Samuel?" Garrett smiled faintly. "He's cooperating fully. His testimony is crucial, and the court has fast-tracked his application to become your legal guardian." "Really, Samuel is an unusual candidate," Garrett admitted. "But the psychologist who evaluated him says he's stable, capable, and genuinely committed. And given your preference, the judge is inclined to approve." "When?" 3 months. Maybe less. You'll need to complete some family counseling sessions together, and Samuel will need to create a suitable living environment." "What does that mean?" "It means he can't raise you in an abandoned control tower," Garrett said gently. "He'll need to find actual housing, stable income, the basics." Liam felt a flash of fear. He won't leave the tower. It's his home. "Then help him understand that home isn't a place," Garrett said. "It's who you're with." 2 weeks later, Liam was allowed to visit Samuel. The tower looked exactly the same, but Samuel looked different. He had cut his hair, trimmed his beard. He wore cleaner clothes. "You look like a person," Liam said. Samuel laughed, a sound Liam had never heard before. "I'm trying to remember how." They sat in the control room, watching the sun set over the abandoned runways. "Garrett says you need to leave the tower," Liam said quietly. "I know. Are you scared?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "Terrified," he admitted. "I've been hiding here for so long. The world outside feels impossible." "Then don't do it alone," Liam said. "We'll figure it out together." Samuel looked at him, and Liam saw tears in the old man's eyes. "I don't know how to be a father," Samuel said. "I don't know how to be a son," Liam replied. "But maybe we can learn." 6 months later, they moved into a small house on the edge of the city. It wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with outdated appliances, a backyard overgrown with weeds. But it was theirs. Samuel got a job as a consultant for a private aviation company, reviewing safety protocols. The work was part-time and mostly remote, but it gave him structure and income. Liam enrolled in a regular school for the first time in his life. It was overwhelming at first, but Samuel helped him study every night, patiently working through math problems and reading assignments. On weekends, they drove back to the tower. It was falling apart slowly, the concrete cracking, the windows breaking one by one. But they still climbed to the top and sat in the control room, looking out at the place that had saved both of them. "Do you miss it?" Liam asked one Saturday afternoon. "Sometimes," Samuel admitted. "But I don't need it anymore. I thought I was waiting here for something I lost. But I was actually waiting for something I hadn't found yet." "What was that?" Samuel looked at him. "A reason to leave." 1 year after the raid on Riverside, Liam testified in federal court. He was 12 now, taller, steadier. Samuel sat in the gallery, watching as Liam calmly described everything he had witnessed. Director Harris sat at the defendant's table, his face blank. When Liam finished, the prosecutor asked one final question. "Are you afraid of the defendant?" Liam looked directly at Harris. "No," he said. "I used to be, but I'm not anymore." Harris was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison. The trafficking network was dismantled completely, and Liam went home with Samuel, where dinner was waiting and homework needed finishing, and life continued in all its ordinary, miraculous ways. 3 years later, Liam was 15. He was thriving in school, considering colleges, thinking about studying aviation engineering. Samuel was healthier than he had been in decades, engaged with the world again, part of a community. One evening, they drove to the airport one last time. The tower was scheduled for demolition. The city had finally decided to clear the abandoned facility and redevelop the land. They climbed the stairs together, carefully navigating the sections that had corroded beyond safety. In the control room, they stood by the windows and watched the sun set one final time. "Thank you," Liam said quietly. "For what?" "For not turning me in that first day. For teaching me. For leaving this place so I could have a home." Samuel put his hand on Liam's shoulder. "You gave me a reason to live again," he said. "I should be thanking you." They stayed until dark, two figures silhouetted against the empty sky, two survivors who had found each other in the ruins and built something neither of them had believed was possible. Family. The tower fell 3 days later, demolished in a controlled explosion that lasted only seconds. But what it had created lasted forever. 2 lives saved. 2 futures built from nothing. A homeless boy who found refuge, and the man in the darkness who chose, finally, to step into the light.